And now, the general weather around Alaska.
Happy New Year and welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service in Alaska region on this first day of 2025. And boy, we brought in the new year with a beautiful aurora display starting at dark on New Year's Eve. And as the night went on, once we got past midnight into the new year, the display took off even further, visible all across Alaska where skies were clear or partly cloudy, and aurora was visible as far south as California, Arizona, northern Mexico. And at least the current geomagnetic storm is subsiding. There still may be some remnant, maybe not quite as active aurora yet tonight, but that was quite a way to bring in 2025. Now, early this weekend, as we go through Friday, Saturday, early Sunday, we have a batch of Arctic air that's going to be working east to west across the interior, bringing some frigid temperatures. We'll see low temperatures, 20s and 30s below, with some of the normally cold spots, 45 to 55 below, and I'll highlight where that is. And then as we get into next week and the following week, so next week into next weekend, a wetter, snowier, milder pattern will develop along the Gulf Coast. Some of that moisture will try to spread inland across southern Alaska, especially along or south of the Alaska Range, particularly the Copper River Basin into the Panhandle, and that would be next week into next weekend. But Fort Yukon, clear and frigid as of the mid-afternoon, 38 below zero. Fort Yukon will see lows at least the next couple of mornings getting down to near 50 below perhaps, and certainly some of the normally cold spots. Kodiak picking up some light rain and fog there along the Gulf Coast, 43 degrees, and a wetter pattern will be developing along the immediate Gulf Coast here as we get into next week. But in the meantime, these are some images. So we had this impressive aurora display to bring in 2025. A strong to severe geomagnetic storm is in the process, though, of subsiding now, so we'll still have the potential for some higher latitude auroras yet tonight, but nothing as active or as colorful as the other night. And then first quarter moon occurs coming up this Monday on January 6th. But this image here, I wanted to point out the color, was taken by Kitty Sopo. She is one of our social scientists with the Weather Service, and she's a gnome. And one thing that stood out to her in the photos was that it picking up more in the way of purple and magenta. And typically, purple magenta is more associated with nitrogen in the upper atmosphere. Typically see the reds and greens associated with atomic oxygen. So pretty neat there in the photos. And here's kind of shows what happened here. So yesterday, things didn't really take off until the afternoon, so I got to kind of reorient myself here to better point this out, but I'm going to step off to the side. So the most intense portion of the geomagnetic storm was in the pre-dawn hours of New Year's Day. We peaked out, reached a severe geomagnetic storm, a KP index around 8. That's pretty decent. It's in the process of coming down, but we've had now since May, this is like the third really good aurora display to go way south into areas of the continental U.S., even into northern Mexico. And then here's a really great shot from Katie Turk in Tok. She was 40 below this morning, but look at this image. This is a corona. That's when the northern lights pass overhead, and then you're looking right up into those curtains. It's much like when you look down a train track and the tracks seem to converge the further out you get along them, and that's just because you're looking up along these magnetic field lines where these aurora beams have set up, and it gives the perspective of the distance, because the base of the aurora is roughly 60 miles above the surface, and then especially the reds and things can extend much higher up to 400 miles. So that's why it looks like it converges there toward the point overhead that we call the zenith. Well, the only hazardous weather thing to speak of is a cold weather advisory for tomorrow morning, Thursday morning into Saturday. And this includes the 40-mile Gold Country, Northway, Tok, up toward Eagle, Some of the low temperatures within this area could be down around 50, 55 below, so just bitterly cold air. There's a shot of Arctic air that's going to backdoor in from the east and work its way right across the interior this early weekend. So get ready for colder temperatures. We'll even feel some of those colder temperatures in the Copper River Basin and all that. It's going to be easily 40 below there, so just keep that in mind. There may be some other cold weather-related advisories coming up here as we go through the day tomorrow. But on the satellite imagery, right now, at least, the dominant weather feature is this high pressure that's over the Yukon Northwest Territories. It's not especially strong in terms of high pressure. It's just below 1050 millibars, but it's enough. And we have a little shot of Arctic air, one that's brushed along the Arctic coast and Arctic Ocean, but then there's going to be this little shot that kind of comes in from east to west, and that's going to keep the storm systems along the Gulf Coast at bay for a little while longer, get some precipitation along Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, parts of the Aleutians, but no major storms, at least in the short term. So here on this New Year's Day afternoon, we have a low in the North Pacific, well south of the Gulf. We have a weaker one south of the southern part of the Alaska Peninsula and another one southwest of the Aleutians. Here's kind of a complex of high pressures, one up near 1050 millibars over the Arctic Ocean with the ridge extending into northwest Canada. And that's going to be the dominant feature coming up here going into the early weekend. This low down here in the North Pacific, this front will try to come further northward a bit. And we also have another occluded front with a low trying to push up into the central western Aleutians. That will have some stronger winds with it across the Aleutians. But by Thursday afternoon, we find a near 1050 millibar high over northwest Canada, just east of the Alcan border. But you're going to have these easterly winds bringing in that colder air. Not only air temperatures be really cold, you potentially wind chills in some of the valleys and gaps where that cold air funnels through. Just for instance, like Copper River Basin, as you go down through Sheep Mountain, Chickaloon to the lower Matsu Valley, you could get some gusty or very cold wind chills associated with that coming up. So by Friday afternoon, we still have 1045, 1046 highs right over the Yukon and Northwest Territories. Strong easterly flow, southern Yukon, northern parts of the Panhandle. It's going to be chilly. And then we have this kind of strung out old occluded front with a couple of lows. Nothing immediately threatening, though there could be some windier conditions that pass through the Aleutians later Thursday into early Friday. And looking at the temperatures, some of this just doesn't do justice. It's going to be colder than even, say, 41 below at Fort Yukon or, say, 32 below at Northway. Depending on if the wind holds up, which doesn't really help, because quite frankly, I'd rather have it calm and 40 below than, say, 25, 30 below with a 15 or 20 mile an hour wind. And looking at what we have out here, just sub-zero temperatures across the north central interior, getting down into the single digits, getting close there. Anchorage Bowl, we have the northern Panhandle, 7 above around Haines and Skagway. Temperatures as we trail out along the Aleutians stay above freezing. The Alaska Peninsula and Aleutians are in the mid-upper 30s. Daytime highs for Thursday, it's 35 below there, Fort Yukon. And again, these temperatures are going to actually be colder in some of these locations near the Alcan border. And come Friday morning, as I mentioned, because of this cold weather advisory, there are going to be some isolated areas within these eastern interior along the Alcan border that are going to be as cold as 45 to 55 below zero. And we find even still single digits northern Panhandle. And then getting down in the single digits into Anchorage as well, and that colder air is going to want to head westward as we go through into Saturday. So daytime highs still sub-zero across much of the central northern portions of the state, with the exception along the immediate west coast. You'll maybe find 15 there at Nome. 40s, lower 40s extending out along the lower Alaska Peninsula around False Pass, Cold Bay down toward Unalaska. But here's the switcheroo coming. So we've had this brief shot of Arctic air going to work its way from east to west across the interior for early this weekend. Later on Sunday and especially next week, things are going to flip around. We're going to start to get a southeast to southerly, milder and more moisture coming into areas of the Gulf Coast and eventually up into the southern interior. So we're going to have some warming temperatures as we go through next week into next weekend. And then with that, whenever you get southeast-south flow, that's going to increase the moisture content, the potential for rain along the coast, and of course the intercoastal mountains, and as you get up toward the interior along and south of the central eastern Alaska Range Copper River Basin, could see some heavier snowfall with this kind of setup. There's also that potential for some mixed icy precipitation. Exactly where that could set up depends on the nature of the low and the track, but something to keep in mind. We've had a pretty dry period here for Christmas into New Year's, and now once we get beyond that, January 7th through the 11th, which will take us into next weekend, we are looking at perhaps a more active pattern and a potential for above normal precipitation, especially over the southeastern quadrant of the mainland into the Panhandle. So once again, I want to wish everyone a Happy New Year, and thank you for watching throughout the year.